The risk of America being pulled back into the Middle East pan of fire. Experts say the U.S. could be drawn back into a risky conflict in the Middle East if the war between Israel and Hamas spreads to the region. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin announced on October 22 that the U.S. is ready to take action if the war between Israel and Hamas escalates into a larger conflict and regional powers cross the red line. By targeting American citizens or soldiers, if any organization or country seeks to expand the conflict and take advantage of this situation, our advice is not to do so, Secretary of Defense Austin said. We maintain the right to self-defense and will not hesitate to take appropriate actions. Observers say that statements by senior U.S. officials show a scenario in which Washington could be pulled back into the furnace of conflict in the Middle East when the war between Israel and Hamas heats up, forcing the U.S. to increase its support. Support with close allies, while countries supporting Hamas will also act more decisively. The United States is one of the countries that supports Israel most strongly in the war with Hamas. Washington has transferred large amounts of weapons and ammunition and sent 2 aircraft carrier battle groups to the Middle East to deter anti-Israel forces. More than 2,000 U.S. Marines are deployed to the waters off the coast of Israel, ready to land to provide logistical and medical support to allies. U.S. President Joe Biden visited Israel on October 18 and pledged billions of dollars in additional aid to Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government. Secretary of State Blinken and Secretary of Defense Austin also previously visited the country to discuss measures to support Israel in the conflict. America's support for Israel is said to be a necessary factor in strengthening relations between the 2 close allies. However, that also makes Washington a target for pro-Hamas forces in the Middle East, a region that the U.S. sought to withdraw from several years ago, after a long period of being bogged down in conflicts. Endless. U.S. bases in Iraq and Syria last week suffered repeated attacks by rockets and suicide drones, UAVs, damaging equipment and injuring a number of U.S. soldiers. The Islamic Resistance Movement in Iraq, an armed group backed by Iran, on October 23 claimed responsibility for carrying out a UAV attack on the U.S. Al-Tanf base on the Iraqi border. This base is located in a very sensitive area, where Iran-backed militia groups often transfer weapons to Hezbollah forces in Lebanon. Iran has repeatedly voiced its support for Hamas and has publicly threatened to open a new front against Israel if it launches a ground attack on the Gaza Strip. As tensions in the Middle East heat up, U.S. military forces in the region have had to take action. On October 19, the U.S. destroyer USS Carney in the Red Sea intercepted many cruise missiles and UAVs from Yemen aimed at Israel, believed to be carried out by pro-Iranian Houthi forces. The Pentagon has also dispatched Patriot and THAAD air defense missile systems to the Middle East and placed many units on combat readiness. The U.S. is getting closer to the possibility of having to directly participate in a regional war in the Middle East, said Ben Wedeman, a veteran CNN analyst, according to Wedeman. Compared to past campaigns in the region such as the Gulf War in 1991 or the attack on Iraq in 2003, the U.S. military is currently in a much more passive position. In previous campaigns, the U.S. and its allies could decide for themselves the time, place, and scale of operations. Now, Washington is struggling to respond to a series of events beyond its control. He stated his opinion after the campaign to withdraw troops from Afghanistan in 2021. The U.S. only maintains a very small military force in this area, as they focus on the Indo-Pacific strategy. But the complicated developments of the Israel-Hamas war are pushing America's already very thin forces in the Middle East into a very difficult situation. Meanwhile, Iran still has great influence in the Middle East. Despite decades-long U.S. embargoes, Iran has still built a strong military force, possessing many self-produced modern weapons and rich combat experience. Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, IRGC, also trains and supplies weapons to many factions opposing the U.S. in the region, including the Houthi group in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas, and the Jihad group Palestinian Islam, PIJ, in the Gaza Strip. The fact that Tehran is a power in the Middle East also gives the country a geographical advantage in the event of a large-scale conflict in the region. the US can spend thousands of dollars to send a soldier from home to the Middle East, while IRGC soldiers just need to catch a bus to get to Baghdad, Damascus, or Beirut, Wedderman said, according to him. Possessing superior military power does not mean that the US can easily defeat its opponents, which was proven in the war in Afghanistan. The United States was unable to defeat the Taliban in 20 years of fighting, eventually having to withdraw its troops when the force entered Kabul and took power. Not only facing a strong opponent like Iran, the US is also at a disadvantage when the Hamas-Israel conflict also puts the country at risk of being turned away by friendly countries in the region. King Abdullah of Jordan, an important partner of Washington, on October 17, canceled a summit with President Joe Biden and Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas after an explosion at a hospital in the Gaza Strip left hundreds dead, according to Matt Burrows, an expert at the Stimson Center Research Institute, based in Washington. Whether the US will be caught up in the Middle East pan of fire again depends on the upcoming moves of Hezbollah and Iran. The US can intervene militarily if Israel is in clear danger, such as being attacked by Hezbollah from the north while conducting a campaign in the Gaza Strip, Burrows said. The fact that American forces and citizens in the Middle East are attacked is also another red line that this country does not allow its opponents to cross. In that case, the United States has little choice but to deploy infantry and bombers to attack Hezbollah bases in Lebanon or cut off weapons supplies from Iran to demonstrate its commitment to protecting its ally Israel as well as its allies, its citizens. Everything is ready for the decades-long conflict between Israel and Palestine to explode into a regional disaster. And the United States could be caught in the vortex of that disaster, Wedderman said.